Hey Tegan, what's in the bag? It's the show where I, Tegan, come home from the comic book store and we look through my bag of comics here on the screen, hopefully for your entertainment. Uh, if you like this show, if you like anything I do, I'd like to invite you to now I could just start over, but I'm going to leave that in there so you people can see, so you can see the depravity that I am subjected to on the reg. Anyway, check out my Patreon. It's got all my stuff on it. Let us rock with What If Donald Duck Became Wolverine. Not just any copy of What If Donald Duck Became Wolverine, but the Peach Momoko Donald Duck as Wolverine. We live in a special time, folks. I don't know if that's good necessarily or bad, but it is very special to see. The funny thing is, this is, like, in a word, this is the worst nightmare of all the most annoying prognosticators after the Disney purchase. Was, oh, well, this will, the whole Marvel line will be Disney stuff. And straight up, not only was that not true, but Disney licenses their comics to everyone. Fantagraphics, Dynamite, Boom did them, all concurrent with Marvel being owned by DC. And the fact they've waited this long to actually give us Marvel-branded Disney books as opposed to in the early 90s when Marvel distributed the Disney line. Different thing. If you see an older comic with a Marvel logo on it, that's why. So when they said recently, oh, these are the first Disney comics to have a Marvel logo, it's like, do you not remember? Do you not remember when Gladstone was distributed with a little Marvel logo in the corner? Because I sure as heck do. It was a very confusing time. It was a very confusing time for me. Because the Marvel era of Disney in the 90s was not the best. There's the late 80s, right up until like 1990. And then Disney Comics, they tried doing their own in-house comics. But then Gladstone got the license back in a few years. And there were some good things about the second coming of Gladstone, certainly. I mean, they published the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. But then they took the line to bookshelf format, like $6 comic books, at a time when, $1.50, $1.75 was, I think, still the going freight. Maybe a little bit later than that, but still, the newsstand didn't exist anymore. But now that seems somewhat irrelevant because suddenly, straight up, you want to talk about, okay, EC Comics is selling based on everything I see. My store gets fat stacks of these, the Uncle Scrooge issue and this Donald Duck one. They seem to be selling. People seem to be picking them up. They had a number of covers. They had a Ron Lim, which, I don't know, didn't really do as much for me. This one actually just seemed like a nicer piece. It looks like everything else Peach Momoko ever does. She's taking the character seriously, which is, it's something. It's interesting. Old Duck Logan. So, as with Minnie, oh my goodness, speak of the devil. Folks, there is an ad for Fantagraphics on the inside front cover of a Marvel comic book. And not just any Fantagraphics, but straight up. It's all the Fantagraphics current Duck books. There's a repackaging of some of the Carl Barks strips here. It looks like, I haven't seen these, but I think they're reformatted to read in a storybook format, I think, just based on looking at the package. But they put out a 90th anniversary collection of Duck stories that had the whole line up through a bunch of, contemporary European stuff that has only recently started to be published in the United States. No one in this country was publishing the big albums of contemporary Disney comic stories from Europe until Fantagraphics started doing it. And they even made a big deal of putting all the old Disney Afternoon Adventures comics, like Darkwing Duck. Straight up, Darkwing Duck, the line, because there's multiple Darkwing Duck books, or have been multiple Darkwing Duck books at Dynamite in recent years. There's a Nega Duck series going on right now with, Jay Lee covers. They're getting Jay Lee to cover Darkwing Duck for Dynamite. But the old Darkwing Duck comics from the Disney Afternoon Adventures era, those are coming out from Fantagraphics. The people who used to publish, their publishing line looked a bit different in 1992, 1998, any time around there when Eros Comics is really going like full bore. And I don't think, just, since we're on the subject, I don't necessarily think that Fantagraphics has mellowed in any other part of their publishing line. Sometimes to their detriment. There have been some controversial turns in the last few years, but they also publish all the old underground stuff and some really raunchy comics still to this day. Disney doesn't seem to necessarily have a problem with it. That's not something you could have, taken for granted 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. But it's a funny old world. Fantagraphics is making a lot of money on Disney comics. Dynamite's making a lot of money on Disney comics. And now, finally, I have to say, not a fan of the Disney purchase, but watching everyone else make money on Disney comics. It has been a little bit like watching your boy get his lunch eaten like over and over again. You think like your Marvel comics. Why are you could do this if you wanted to. You don't want to. And now apparently they do want to. So like a lot of contemporary Disney stuff, this is coming from Europe. From, I think, these look like Italian names. A lot of Italian names in Marvel Comics recently. A lot of Spanish names as well. I was talking with someone the other day. And we're talking about the exchange rate and how even if you live in the United States, comic books do not pay well. In other countries, I was wondering for a while, I was scratching my head at seeing Japanese talent working in American comics, thinking, why aren't you working for, the Japanese industry and with probably a much larger audience? So, well, the exchange rate makes it, I guess, worthwhile for Peach Momoko and Gurihuru and a number of Italian names you see across the mainstream. So, the American comic book industry has inroads all over the world thanks to the strength of the dollar. No small thing in the larger scheme of things. Pete Skull. Oh, wow. Oh, so this is really old. They're not just giving us Wolverine. They really are giving us old Duck Donald. Are there a number of stories, or are they just doing? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I thought this would be kind of silly, but now that I see that this Donald Duck Marvel crossover book with Mickey Mouse dressed as Hawkeye, this is directly adapting a Mark Millar story. That is, maybe I should have paid attention. I mean, maybe that was clear from the solicitation. We will be reading this on the TikTok, this Power Pack Into the Storm. It's a gorgeous book. We got one more. We're going to do X-Men Micronauts and then one more X-Men Limited series before we get to the fall, and we'll have our Summer of X out of the way. I don't know if we'll be doing this right after the Summer of X, but we'll be doing it at some point before the year is out. This is a nice looking book if you can deal with the contemporary European Disney style, which is very slick. Doesn't have a lot of rough edges, intentional or unintentional. Like a lot of the European artists who are coming over to do work in the American market these days, it can be very, very professional, I think, to its detriment sometimes. This is a nice spread. Who's the colorist here? Colorist is doing some work here. Lucio Ruvidati. I guess they're for Edizione BD, which would be a European firm. See, that's more than I know. Someone should pipe up in the comments if you know more about the Italian comics industry. They also just put out that Dylan Dog Batman book, which got my attention because it's massive. 3 80-page issues for $5. And it sort of went over my radar, I guess you'd say, because I don't care really too much about Dylan Dog. I know very little about the character. And then I saw someone on Twitter saying, oh yeah, they're putting out this really gorgeous Batman crossover that is a massive bang for your buck, 80 pages for $5. And indeed, it is a gorgeous comic book, 240 pages for $15. That is a good bargain. Oh, so we get to see Donald Duck going Snicket. There we go. Oh my, so here's a gallery of Donald Duck in every different Wolverine costume, from the X-Force uniform, from when he took the uniform off of, who was that fellow's name? Fang or something? It was the Imperial Guardsman. It was based on Timberwolf. The Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, a new X-Men look. The classic with the very skinny, small Herb Trimpe ears. Him as a caveman. That looks like Astonishing X-Men period. Classic brown and tan. Classic yellow and black. My God. Yeah, I guess Mickey can dress as Hawkeye, because Mickey has been kind of a Hawkeye in American comics for a long time. Distant third in that matchup for the Disney lineup. And here's Duck Wolverine as Patch with Gray Hulk Goofy. Goofy Hulk. Oh my. Which one of these roads leads to Toronto? The one on the right. I'm not doing the Donald Duck voice. I'm sorry. I'm not. If you were hoping I would try, well, I am sorry. Besides the fact, Donald Duck doesn't have the speech impediment in the comic books. Read them. Never mentioned. And it's practically impossible considering the level of, expository dialogue in, the Bark stories. I've written about this before. It's never really commented on. Pluto is Colossus. Krakoa. Duckoa, sorry. Duckoa. Oh my goodness. There is a Duckoa. Thank you, God. And here's Pete, as the Red Skull, he's got the money bin, of course, and Iron Man's helmet, both. So that makes sense if you're doing a matchup, of course. Pete's got Captain Ameriduck's shield. Squack. You have to admit, this comic book is a journey. So is this. You can tell they planned out their tie-in trade program based on years ago show announcements, because I don't believe that we're any closer to a Wonder Man show, although they could actually do a decent Wonder Man show if you don't have an irrational hatred of Wonder Man like 95% of the comics field. My God. Wait, oh, so Scrooge wasn't dead? Didn't say that. Well, I don't know. I doubt there'll be a follow-up. Although, who knows? If this sells well, that's the world we live in, folks. You know. Speak of the devil, here's Guri-Huru. I have a couple issues of it. I didn't get the whole thing, I don't think. But anything of Guri-Huru's you see, definitely worth picking up. They're very talented. Very distinctive looking Marvel book. I would go so far as to say that their Gwenpool material is, one of the essential runs, certainly at Marvel, of the decade. And next month we're going to do it all over again with What If Donald Duck Became Thor. Am I sorry I bought it? No. I feel like I got my money's worth. Now what we need to see is them putting out Disney comics with more American talent. There's lots of people in America right now who I think could do good Disney books. Not just Jason Aaron. No offense to Jason Aaron, but him being first through the gate, I guess it's because Mark Waid was at DC. That's the only thing I can figure. Justice League of America, #1. From, you got to tell me? Oh my goodness. Do you see? Straight up. New credits. Now look, I have no proof that my agitation had anything to do with this. But straight up, I have been screaming about this for years. I thought it was an absolute, straight up scandal that they were getting away with that. And they have fixed it. So hallelujah. Thank you, DC. You have done right. It took a while. Could have been doing it years ago. But it doesn't look like you're going to be stopping publishing facsimiles. They seem to be a successful market niche now. So, new printings of stuff like Action Comics #1. There you go. Man, that makes me so happy to see. That makes me so happy to see. Because this comic was written by Gardner Fox, penciled by Mike Sekowsky, inked by Bernard Sachs, colorist unknown, of course. They don't know who inked or colored most of this stuff. And lettered by Gaspar Saladino. Now, I actually, a few years ago, for some odd reason, I sat down and read a whole clutch of these early Justice League stories. And they are a real hoot. Really fun stuff. You can see how this comic sold pretty well. Because certainly, by the standards of the DC line at the time, this was a high-ticket book. looks slick, all your big dudes, and Wonder Woman showing up. You know, Flash and Green Lantern, they were only like 3 and 1 years old when this comic saw a print. Martian Manhunter, he'd been around for a little while, but he wasn't really a big wheel. So as much as anything else, you know, the purpose of a book like this was also to ground these guys, the new characters, you know, by putting them right alongside the already recognized and known heroes, including, even though these are, well, I said something in the last episode of the Storage Locker where we were looking at the old Earth 1 and Earth 2 Batman, and I mentioned customarily the beginning of the Earth 1 Batman's career is the beginning of the new look, even though he's right here on Earth 1 without the Yellow Circle, because indeed the Yellow Circle would be still a few years in coming along. So yeah, this is not their first appearance. They first appeared as a team together in a couple issues of The Brave and the Bold, because that was what The Brave and the Bold was doing at that point, was launching new franchises. And so they'd already met. We'd already got to see kind of more or less what the deal was, which is, you know, state of the art at the time, which is an updating of the old Justice Society formula. Now, the interesting thing about the old Justice Society, you know, a slight disappointment if you go back with modern expectations, but they never, or very rarely, that is, appeared on panel having adventures together, especially in the early days. What they would do is they would get together for a couple pages at the beginning of the issue. A threat of some kind would announce itself, or a mission, and then they would split up into chapters that were dealt with by their respective creative teams. So you get a Joe Kubert Hawkman story as part of the first run of All-Star Comics. Justice League of America did not go for that route. It was one story with all the heroes. However, they did, even though they worked side by side more, they did a fair amount of splitting up, which was just how things, and you know, that stuck around to the Super Friends, certainly. The Super Friends do a lot of splitting up, so everyone can have their own different type of adventure. Because writing an adventure that can actually play to the strengths of 6 very different characters, ultimately, that, you know, you need someone as smart as Gardner Fox to figure that out. Because Gardner Fox, he was an old hand from, you know, the golden age of sci-fi days. So he was a relentlessly ingenious plotter, Plotter. Sometimes these books are absolutely absurd, but they're nevertheless then really fun, readable. They're certainly very wordy by modern standards, but you know, you expect that with older comics. It's no big deal because you enjoy the corny dialogue, because it can be a little bit corny, especially when this snapper car. Man, quote, "This three-eyed Big Daddy is a real mothball." Yeah, I'd almost recommend you go and read the early run of Justice League just so you can understand why I hate Snapper Carr so much. And I have even enjoyed comics that Snapper Carr is in. I mean, these are great comics, even though he's in them. He's the second banana in the Hour Man series in the late 90s, which is definitely something I'd recommend. But he's a putrid human being. He betrays the team to the Joker, for one thing. How are your shopping matters? Oh, interesting. And at the drugstore, the owner complained to me that you made a mess of his magazine rack. Seems like they put that in there just because they were getting yelled at by magazine rack operators. Fix is in, folks. That's a nice looking Wonder Woman fighting a dinosaur. Excellent. She's doing something. She's dancing around with a pterodactyl. And Superman. Man, look at how nice this is. Just, who was that again? That's Bernard Sachs inking these early Mike Sekowsky stories. And just look at the economy of this brushwork here once you actually, it looks very slick, but once you look at it up close, you see, it's kind of chunky in places. It almost has a dashed off effect once you really look at it. But it's so professional that just glancing at the page, there's absolutely nothing out of miss. But it has some real energy once you look under the hood there. Interesting. And this is how everyone would draw rocks in comics for 40 years. I feel like Keith Giffen has drawn this exact rock 1,000 times over the course of his career. Watch your hands there, Buster. So here, my two favorites, Hal Jordan and Aquaman. I got nothing against Aquaman. I just don't really care for Aquaman stories that much. But this man right here, you know, I've read a lot of Hal Jordan stories for someone who really does not like Hal Jordan. It's because I like stories in space. I like science fiction stuff. Even if he's in them, Green Lantern is usually still pretty fun. But what that means is I've read a lot of, fun, readable Green Lantern stories that were nonetheless, built around an absolute vacuum of a human being. The Jeff Johns Green Lantern for My Sins. I read it. It was very readable. Dave Gibbons drew a bunch of Green Lantern in the 80s that I'll bet you haven't read. Try not to get too worked up about the word balloons and you'll enjoy them just fine. What's the difference between a porpoise and a dolphin? Well, I think we probably still need to have public service announcements about that to this day. Although both these marine mammals belong to the same family, Delphinidae, porpoises are generally distinguished by blunt, rounded snouts, and dolphins by long, pointed noses and elongated beak-like jaws. I wish the comics still gave us science facts. No one has given us science facts since, the early run of Quasar. If they let me write the comic books, I will put science facts in the comic books. Half of my media intake is science facts. So, they already got letters, and the first letter is, Dear Editor, could you please give the Justice League of America its own comic book and publish it 8 times a year? Even 12 times a year if possible? I wonder if that was a ringer. But the fact is, they'd already had a few issues of Brave and the Bold, so they probably had lots of kids writing in, asking them, like Robert Lee, age 8.5, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There you go. We'll give some serious consideration to the junior JLA, admittedly. That wasn't probably that hard of an idea to think of. Now, of course, putting a version of Wonder Woman who exists in the past into a present time story, that was an unforced error. That was a problem. That was a problem. The Animal Justice League of America, now there, with Crypto, Streaky, Congarilla, Ace the Bad Hound, that is an idea. That was ahead of its time because they just put out a DC Animal Pal spin-off book today. It did not end up coming home with me because I needed to buy a box. World of No Return with Batman and Martian Manhunter. That's a good team up. So they're in the year 3600. Well, there's this dude. This dude looks awesome. Gotta love those Sekowsky, Sachs team up. My goodness. Great stuff. And you know how much this comic cost? $3.99 American. You can walk into the comic book store right now and get, shrunk down a little bit. But straight up, this is an enjoyable comic book. It's fun. It's colorful. It's printed on this decent pulpy paper. And, oh yeah, the day is saved by Snapper Carr, who sneaks over and uses Despero's machine on him. He's pretending he's hypnotized. I saw how you worked this gizmo before. I'll leave Despero just enough energy, like to barely stay alive. Oh. So, yeah, that's why he wasn't. But look at how disappointed Despero looks. That is an emotional spectrum you don't get from the modern Despero, who you always see when he's super muscle bound now. But he was just sort of this pipsqueak little haggard dude. That's the Despero I want to see back. Man, how many years did they run this Palisades, New Jersey ad for? They ran it for years. Do you want spending money? Well, yes, of course. In 15 minutes, I'll prove you can have a rugged, virile, He-Man body. 204 Revolutionary War soldiers. Man, they're just like cardboard cutouts, but that's still kind of cool. All right. I know we looked at the last issue of this on one of these videos. I try not to repeat myself, but this is a different creative team every issue. And straight up, I figured you might want to know that there's a Walter Simonson variant on this Darth Maul comic book. Because look at this. Look at this. We've been paying a lot of attention to late career Frank Miller lately. Maybe it's time we spend a little bit more attention on late career Walter Simonson here, because this is kind of far out. This is a very interesting piece. Like a lot of this black, white, and red stuff, I question if it even needs the red, but, that's just me. Look at this. He's getting really chunky and Eric Larson-y in his later stuff here. Darth Vader 409. Man, I know I've said it before, but they got to do something different with these Star Wars comics. They have no juice whatsoever. Star Wars comics can have juice. Like this, this has a little bit of juice. They can have juice when they just, do something off to the side. They need to get some energy back in the regular line because they put out a lot of Star Wars books. They take up a lot of shelf space, and they have so many different covers, and the whole thing just looks very daunting. They need to jazz it up somehow. Greg Pak writing for Luca Pizzari and Will Sliney on pencils, with Pizzari, Sliney, Jay Leaston, and Roberto Poggi on inks. Andre Massa on color art there. The regular cover was E.M. Gist. There was another variant by David Marquez. I would most likely have picked this up anyway, but it was the most impressive of those covers. My impression on the outside looking in, as someone who is definitely very friendly to the idea of, Star Wars ancillary tie-ins, but is also picky because life is short. A lot of these, the contemporary Marvel Star Wars books, it looks like one long crossover after another. And that's not inviting. That is not inviting to someone who is, picking up and flipping through on the stands. So, yeah, there's our boy. There's our boy. Yeah. You put Darth Maul in a comic, and it'll probably come home with me. I don't know what to tell you. This looks nice enough. Again, I don't know this name, this Pizzari. I may have seen some of his stuff before. See, I think the presence of the red is keeping them from really going all out with the black and the white. Now, that's what it's there to do, to be its own design element. But, maybe just try doing some black and white ones for a while, guys. Go back to the old school. I mean, straight up. Japan does so much more with black and white than we can dream of, it seems like. And we used to publish a fair amount of material in black and white, but we haven't really for a while. And it feels like those muscles have atrophied. There's no reason why those muscles have to atrophy. People still do black and white comics all over the world. It's a different muscle. To a degree, it's a pure form of cartooning, you could even say, because there's a simplicity to it. Yeah, plus I think I've said before, this High Republic logo treatment and design, it just, your eyes bounce right off it. At least for me, he's fighting a big monster. There you go. This is what you want. You want to see. Oh, so the monster's like, okay, I'm leaving. I don't think I want to try to fight you. That actually that's pretty funny right there. Like, yep, I'm noping out of this one. See, Dark Droids. That seems like a good hook for a crossover. Just the droids go bonkers, but it was huge. It kept coming out. There was too much of it. They're publishing for the omnibus. If that's their successful format for this material, the omnibus and the compendium, I mean, more power to them. But amortized month by month, it's very forbidding. Santa Staros. I want to say spin-off from the Dr. Aphra. When are we getting the Dr. Aphra TV show? I know I keep asking that. I know I'm not the only one who keeps asking that. I know we'll probably get it eventually. I have to give it to them for holding some restraint there, considering the fact that they could have been making money off of her for a while. But it took them forever to do a Ahsoka series too. And I haven't seen any. Well, here's a comic book based on that. I haven't seen any of the TV shows. I haven't even seen the season 1 of Mandalorian. That's how out of the Star Wars loop I was. This is not my favorite chapter of this series. It's not bad. I wish it were more distinctive. Nice looking. There's my guy. Love it. They put out a Visions book that was a spin-off of the animated specials they did, which I still haven't seen, but I got the comic book for it because it looks nice. If you're looking for, the occasional Star Wars gem in the bins, that's a nice one, the Visions tie-in they did. Next, and here's the relaunch of all the books, or they're getting ready for the relaunch. Starting an Inquisitor series, they're in deep with the High Republic, Ahsoka. Wait, they got a Bosk Jedi? That's vaguely interesting, I guess. The last survivors of Alderaan are under attack. And here's an odd one that I've been picking up. Who knows, depending on how interesting it is when all is said and done. I may write about this, may do it on the show. It's definitely weird and notable. And the reason it's weird and notable is you see the Kevin Eastman cover here. Kevin Eastman has actually quietly become rather prolific for someone at his stage in his career. And it happens sometimes with older artists, especially ones who maybe weren't as prolific in earlier phases of their career, like Kevin Eastman, who by his own admission, the Turtles ruined him as an artist because all he wanted to do was draw. And it was the last thing he ever got to do at the height of it all for that whole madness, because it was a madhouse. And he was in charge of it, co-in charge of it. But, and then he got involved with a lot of other things too. Heavy Metal Magazine. So I pay attention to his work when I see it now, even if I don't buy a lot of the Turtle stuff now. They haven't quite pulled me back into the fold on the Turtles. But I like seeing his work, because working as much as he does now, and not just on Turtle stuff, he does covers for Marvel. He's done a couple smaller stories for Marvel, for anthologies. It definitely seems like there's some joy in his work now from someone who just really enjoys sitting down and making comics, which is, from his own repeated testimonies, all he ever really wanted was to sit down and draw. So he's not drawing this. This is a Romana Clef that is being co-written with David Avallone, scripted by David Avallone, artwork by Ben Bishop, colors Tommy Varga, letters Taylor Esposito. And so I'll give you the story so far. Back in the early 90s, Shane Bookman and his brother Paul co-created the comic book Radically Rearranged Ronin Ragdolls. It became a global phenomenon, but over a decade later, Books was burnt out, tired of running the franchise with his increasingly truculent brother, and sold the Ragdolls to the Kiddyscope Corporation, who he used the money to create Siberia Arts, a comic book publisher that would help creators bring their dreams to life. So, yes, Kevin Eastman, one of the most significant personalities in comics for decades, giving us his Romana Clef here. You have to admit, that's kind of interesting. But in the long run, Siberia crashed and burned, the money ran out, and just a few days ago, his business partner and fellow legendary comics creator, Frank Forrest, committed a particularly gory suicide. Reeling from Frank's death, backed into making a deal with Lithuanian gangsters to save his company and his life, Books arrives at NY Comic-Con to discover the director of the gritty Ragdolls reboot has made a fresh mess for him to clean up. So, yeah, it's interesting. It is a comic book creator of import, of significance, having fun with his life. I don't know if scores are settled. Like I say, I've just flipped through them. You know what I do. I stack them up and I go back. I don't know if he's settling scores or spoofing. I do know he's on, at least from what I understand, he's on relatively good terms with Peter Laird these days, even if that maybe wasn't always the case. But it's interesting. You have to acknowledge it is really interesting to see him talking about his career in his industry and drawing some sections. These are the flashback sequences, I think, of him growing up, if I recall correctly. You better be good at drawing because you're useless at every other darn thing in the world. So straight up. Like I say, it's maybe fictionalized Romana Clef, but the closest thing to actual straight-up autobiographical content from a co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. My goodness. My goodness. He looks like Tony Stark here. And he's not wearing Zubaz. Look, I don't have that many celebrity sightings, but till the day I die, I will remember that Kevin Eastman was wearing Zubaz in public long past the time when anyone but Kevin Eastman would be wearing them. I respect the hell out of that man. I really do. I really, really do. So yeah, this is interesting. At the very least, it'll be interesting. Maybe it'll be fun. I don't know if there was ever gunplay and Lithuanian gangsters involved in the Turtles at any point. That seems like something, organized crime. That seems like something that would have been covered at some point. Maybe when he sat down with Gary Groth, that would have come up. If you have never read the Kevin Eastman interview with the Comics Journal, it is one of a handful of truly essential primary documents from that whole era of comic book history. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And what is this? GTFO Girl by Amanda Cavallini. Oh, I don't know. This is something else. Okay. That's cool. I dig it. That looks fun. And there's more of this to come. I don't know how many. There's the man himself, Kevin Eastman. So, yeah, there's apparently still more stories to go. I've been buying the Kevin Eastman covers, but they got an Amanda Connor next issue. It's always hard to turn down an Amanda Connor cover. I have the first trade of this. It looks really good, but I haven't found the time to sit down. I need to just sit down and read it because it looks really fun, I have to admit. All right, so I think that's everything. We looked at this a while back, and then I realized I wasn't even paying attention. Did I mention at the time that this guy's related to Stephen King? I didn't know that. I don't know if I would have bought it if I didn't know that. I can't keep track. I can't keep track of these things. King is a common enough name. Oh, well. All right, so we had some fun. So, first thing I want to do, point you in the direction of picking up the Comics Journal Yearbook Best of 2023 because it's got features on the 10 best comics of last year, according to, us, the people who put together the list. I think it's a pretty good list. Definitely. There's not a bad comic on it. And there's some interesting writing about Anna Fichtenberger and Katrine DeVries, Oliver Schwarren, Bill Griffith. Bill Griffith ended up pretty high on the list. Christy Valenti writing on Sammy Harcum, Sally Madden, who has appeared on Udder Madness and is currently the one of the managing editors of the online journal. She's writing about Okazaki Kyoko. Anan, Story from the Zoo, interviewed by Tony Wei-Ling. Enlightened Transsexual Comics by Sam Zabo, interviewed by Carolyn Cash. I haven't read that yet, but I haven't read that book yet. I need to get a copy of that before I sit down with an interview. The Necrophilic Landscape by Morgan Vogel. I haven't read that either. Chris Cajero-Silla. Fielder number 2. Kevin Huizenga. I wrote about Fielder number 2 for the Journal just a few months ago. An excellent book. That's being written about by Rena Aoyang. And little old me at number 1, writing about Monica from Daniel Close, which was our book of the year. It was the consensus choice. It is excellent. If you haven't read it yet, that's a recommendation, friend. And we also have they printed all of our individual lists. which, reflect a number of different comic book critics' reading habits. My list is, I think, my list is the biggest outlier because I actually put a Marvel book on it. But, I'm just built like that. All right. I got daily comic book reviews on TikTok and Instagram. I do a podcast on Top Cow Comics with Claire Napier. It's called Udder Madness. We just put up a new show talking about the new Witchblade #1. It's available on the Patreon right now for you to listen to. It's pretty fun. If I do say so myself, we had some fun talking about that comic. That's the whole point of the podcast, is hopefully you enjoy listening to us talk for, way too long. I do have a review coming up on the Journal. Should be up any day now. I don't know when. We'll see. On Godzilla, it'll be up at some point here. What else? And just check out my Patreon again. I'll point you in that direction. And that's enough. That way too many things to keep going in your head. All right. Have a wonderful day.